Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Cathy Lamb. Cathy Lamb lived in an affluent area of Palm Beach. Cathy had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she lived with her father. During her teenage years, her mother was absent, which took a significant emotional toll on her. She was self-conscious about her weight, feeling larger than her peers. Fortunately, her stepmother was kind and supportive. Recognizing Cathy's insecurities, she helped her build her confidence, and over time, Cathy became more confident. She started playing sports and trying to lose weight. Cathy was very smart and kind, which helped her make friends in high school. She was active and cheerful, and her problems seemed to disappear when she was with her friends. One of those friends was Jeff. They met when he was 17 and she was 16, and they quickly felt a special connection. Their relationship continued even after they graduated. 2 years later, they secretly married, surprising their families. When their parents found out, they thought the couple was too young to make such a serious decision, but the couple was determined to stay together, despite family pressure. It seemed like the newlyweds had a bright future ahead of them. Jeff worked hard at a local repossessed car park, while Cathy found work as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. She had the necessary education and wanted to advance in the field. Over the years, Jeff remained a tow truck driver, while Cathy became a top pharmacist. A year later, she was offered a job as a district planner for distributing drugs to pharmacies, an opportunity she eagerly accepted. They achieved their dream of owning a home and enjoyed 12 happy years there until a devastating tragedy occurred. On June 15, 2004, Jeff returned home from work at around 7 p.m. He intended to invite his wife to dinner. However, as soon as he entered, he was horrified to see blood all over the hallway, running down the walls. The gruesome evidence of blood splatter and brain matter terrified him. As he called 911, he struggled to speak and held back tears. Initially, the operator mistook his cries for those of a woman, but Jeff eventually plucked up the courage to describe his home, which now looked like the set of a horror movie. At the end of the corridor, there was a significant amount of blood on one wall, as if it had been splattered. Facing this wall, about 1.5 meters away, similar splatters were visible on the opposite wall, and they extended down the stairs leading to the second floor. On the upper level, in the midst of the gruesome scene, lay 30-year-old Cathy, who was unresponsive. The operator attempted to guide Jeff over the phone to provide first aid, but Cathy's injuries were so severe that there was nothing that could be done. When the police arrived, they were taken aback by the horrific sight. It was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. Cathy's body showed multiple severe head injuries from heavy objects. Her skull and face were so badly damaged that they appeared completely disfigured. Although the murder weapon was not found at the scene, a thorough laboratory analysis determined that it was likely a long, heavy object with a hexagonal shape or similar features. Jeff mentioned that he had tried to call his wife several times after 5 p.m. but received no answer, which he found unusual. Concerned, he rushed home to meet her. It turned out that not only Cathy was injured, the couple had 3 large dogs in the house, Jeff's dog and his wife's 2 dogs. Tragically, both of his wife's pets were discovered badly beaten and lying on the floor next to their deceased owner. They had suffered severe head injuries and were barely alive. Unfortunately, the injuries were so extensive that the veterinarians had to euthanize the dogs to relieve their suffering. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff's dog was found locked in his owner's bedroom. Paws from all 3 dogs were found at the scene, along with blood that police believed did not come from the animals. They suspect the blood may have come from a struggle with the killer. The blood has been sent for analysis to determine its source and whether it can help the investigation, and they await the results. Police are uncertain whether the blood on the dogs came from Cathy or whether they fought with the attacker to protect her, resulting in their fatal injuries. Police found the dogs unharmed after the woman had been killed and the fight had begun. The amount of blood on the animals suggests that they had seriously injured the attacker, possibly lacerating an arm or leg. This means that the attacker would have bled profusely, possibly from an open wound, and that he would have sought medical attention at a hospital. The attacker's intentions remain unclear. He may have acted recklessly or out of a deep hatred for his victim, ignoring the large dogs that lived with the family. After examining the crime scene, the police still lacked any concrete leads. They had to wait for the autopsy results to gather more information. In the meantime, they checked all the local hospitals for the injured attacker. Several suspicious people came in with injuries that were found to be unrelated to the incident, as their injuries did not match those of a dog bite. The police began talking to local residents in the hope that someone had seen suspicious activity at Cathy's home or had noticed the criminal fleeing, possibly injured. Unfortunately, no one observed anything unusual. They were also trying to find a motive. Robbery seemed unlikely given the many valuables in the family's home. Only the gold earrings with diamonds that the Cathy was wearing during the attack were missing, while everything else remained untouched. Even the money, which was clearly visible, was not taken. It seems unlikely that a robber would ignore such an opportunity. There were no indications of a break-in, the furniture was undisturbed, drawers were not opened, and belongings were not scattered about, as thieves typically do when they search for valuables. This led the police to explore alternative motives and various theories. The forensic expert determined that the murder occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. Jeff, the first suspect who found the scene, had a strong alibi. At that time, he was on the job and was seen by numerous co-workers. Additionally, he showed no signs of injuries that would typically result from a struggle with the dogs. Just as police were about to clear Jeff of suspicion, an unknown young woman arrived at the family home. Joy Steele came to the house and introduced herself as Jeff's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since Jeff had been crying earlier. The police found this an interesting case, as a man who had just lost his wife was being comforted by his mistress, with whom he had been in a serious relationship for a long time. This revelation made the case seem even more suspicious. 7 years into their relationship, Cathy discovered Jeff's infidelity. Despite this, they remained together and did not divorce. Cathy forgave him and even encouraged him to end the affair, leading to their reconciliation and continued life together just before the tragic incident. Police are considering whether a love triangle may have been a motive for the crime. Jeff had a strong motive for killing his troubled wife. That doesn't necessarily mean Jeff killed Cathy himself. He may have convinced someone else to do it. The police discovered a third dog locked in one of the rooms, which was unharmed. This was peculiar, especially given the serious injuries of the other 2 dogs belonging to the Cathy. Did the criminal truly hate her to the extent that he chose to ruin everything she cherished? The police needed to find answers to these questions. In the meantime, one of the police was questioning Jeff's mistress, Joy Steele, at the location of the incident. Joy shared her and Jeff's future plans. They planned to move away after a while Jeff planned to quit his job. Joy had a solid alibi. Joy, who was apparently working at a restaurant during the time of the murder, was present, and multiple people could confirm this. In addition, Joy had no injuries on her body. Although the suspicious couple could not have been directly involved in the murder due to their alibis and their lack of injuries, the police have not ruled them out as suspects given the serious circumstances surrounding the crime. They had a strong motive for their plan. The investigation into the crime and the hiring of the killer continues, with the police focusing on identifying potential enemies or those who may have wanted to harm Cathy. However, Cathy's friends and relatives have been unable to identify any enemies, with the exception of her husband. That same day, another suspect emerged. Jeff had another mistress named Lisa. A few weeks before the murder, Lisa's husband, Ray, discovered them together when he came home early from work and found Jeff shirtless on the couch. This confrontation led Ray to kick Jeff out of the house. The next day, Ray calls Lisa and threatens to kill Jeff if he continues with Lisa. Ray emerged as a potential suspect due to his violent nature and apparent motive. However, the situation raised questions about the Cathy. Why did Ray kill Jeff's wife? She had not harmed him and was actually the victim in the scenario, just like Ray. Despite this, Jeff continued to blame Ray. He believed that Ray had gone to the house to carry out his threat against Jeff, but Jeff was not home at the time. It is also possible that upon arriving at Jeff's house, Ray was in danger from Jeff's wife and dogs, so Ray felt compelled to kill her and the dogs. However, this motive does not fit with the extreme violence the killers showed towards Cathy. Her injuries were extremely brutal, suggesting that this was not a random crime, but an act of deep hatred. The police then turned their attention to Lisa, the second lover. Despite her husband's threats, she remained in contact with Jeff. Cell phone records confirmed that they frequently called and texted each other, including at the time of the Cathy's murder. Lisa and her husband Ray were both investigated, but they had solid alibis and were eliminated as suspects. However, the police decided to track the geolocation data of the lovers' mobile devices to gain more details. The call between Lisa and Jeff took place just minutes after the murder. Jeff's cell phone was found near his home, and Jeff was not at work at the time, contrary to what he had previously said. Additionally, Jeff's dog was unharmed, which seems more than just a coincidence. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of the animals. They collected DNA samples from the dog's muzzle and paws. Notably, the stains found on Jeff's dog were identified as palm prints. Blood samples taken from the scene were confirmed to belong to the Cathy, indicating that the perpetrator was in the hall with the dog after the attack on Cathy, during which she was injured or possibly killed. Police suspected that the killer's DNA might be on the animal's muzzles and paws. However, the investigation disproved this theory, revealing that the blood was not human, but believed to be from dogs that may have been fighting each other. By analyzing all the new information, police were able to piece together a clearer picture of the events that occurred on that tragic day. Someone entered the house and discovered Cathy along with her 3 large dogs. The attacker hit the woman in the head with a heavy object. 2 dogs were present, also seriously injured and later died. And they did not attack the attacker. They endured the blows without defending themselves. The 3rd dog also did not confront the attacker. Instead, the 3rd dog focused on protecting the other 2 dogs. This behavior aroused suspicion. The police consulted dog handlers for insights. Experts suggested that the dog's lack of resistance indicated they were familiar with the attacker and viewed him as a friend. This familiarity explained why they did not confront him but instead appeared to bite each other. Police found bite marks on the dogs, leading them to conclude that only Jeff, the owner of the surviving dog, could have attacked Cathy. Additionally, geolocation data indicated that the Jeff was near the house, which supported their suspicions. However, the Supreme Court only had circumstantial evidence, meaning they still had a long way to go before bringing any charges. The police needed one crucial piece of information to strengthen their case. With no further clues, the police focused on investigating Jeff's personal life to understand what might have motivated Jeff to kill his wife. It turned out that the family had recently faced significant financial difficulties, which had affected Jeff for many years before these events. Jeff's boss caught him stealing a large sum of money, about $30,000. Jeff had not spent it all and agreed to return it. He also paid his boss $20,000 in restitution. The police then analyzed Jeff's activities. It turned out that his job brought in only a small income, just enough for his family's needs. He also spent money on his mistress. His wife's income was much higher, but he did not want to tell her about his problems. Jeff was characterized as someone without any remarkable business skills. He was neither particularly foolish nor exceptionally intelligent. His earnings were limited, making the compensation amount a serious financial burden for him. Despite living in an affluent neighborhood, he struggled to come up with the funds. Jeff sought ways to earn extra money or secure a loan, but all these efforts proved fruitless, and the total amount of compensation remained far beyond his reach. He later learned that he was the sole beneficiary of Cathy's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000. Police believed that this amount of money could solve all of Jeff's financial problems. On the day of the incident, police collected the clothes he was wearing at the time. However, forensic experts conducted a quick test and found no blood or DNA from Cathy on his clothes. The suspect was wearing dark clothing, making it difficult to detect any blood stains. The experts meticulously studied every millimeter of the items using a microscope with 60,000 times magnification. Inside the jeans, they discovered several small red drops, which the forensic team identified as blood. This blood had seeped deep into the fabric fibers, suggesting that it was from high-velocity splashes. This evidence was consistent with the nature of the injuries sustained by the Cathy. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Cathy. The police were further surprised when they examined Jeff's other belongings. They found a gold earring embedded with a diamond in one of his trouser pockets, which he had claimed was stolen during an attack. This indicated that he likely staged the scene and hesitated to dispose of the item to avoid being caught at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case in court, the police needed to find the murder weapon. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to find the weapon. It took the prosecutor's office 2 months to establish a clear connection between the killer and the victim. During this time, an employee of the company where Jeff worked discovered a hexagonal crowbar on the roof of the building. The tool was standard equipment on the company's tow trucks and was available to all employees. What made the crowbar suspicious was the significant amount of blood found on it. The employee promptly notified the police of the discovery. Jeff claimed that he had lost his crowbar and was unable to provide it to the police. This raised suspicions that the bloody crowbar belonged to him and may have been hidden as the murder weapon. The crowbar was sent to a laboratory, where experts compared it to the injuries found on Cathy's head. They concluded that the shape of the tool matched the impact marks. Additionally, the blood found on the crowbar was confirmed to be Cathy's through analysis. Jeff was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Friends knew he had often complained about his troubled marriage. He claimed that Cathy couldn't manage household chores, which made him angry. However, he overlooked that she was the one supporting the family financially and covering their travel expenses, leaving her little time for housework. Jeff's car was always cluttered with garbage, yet he continued to blame Cathy. He frequently talked to friends about wanting to end their relationship, and several acquaintances reported that he was considering divorce. Cathy was unhappy in her marriage to Jeff due to his betrayals and chaotic lifestyle, which she knew about. She often vented her frustrations to friends but couldn't bring herself to leave him because she loved him deeply. Despite her unhappiness, she stayed with Jeff, trying to tolerate his behavior. For Jeff, murder seemed like a better option than going through a divorce. He was in dire financial straits after stealing $30,000 at work, which had severely impacted his finances. If he divorced Cathy, they would have to divide their assets, and he risked losing their home. He felt he had nothing left to lose, as a divorce would leave him with little since Cathy could claim most of their assets. Jeff figured that by committing murder, he could use the life insurance payout to pay off his debts, keeping part of the money to start a new life with his mistress. Jeff had promised to make a choice between his two girlfriends, Lisa and Joy, but the decision remained a secret. During the investigation, police uncovered more details about the crime. On the day it happened, Jeff left for work but had actually planned to kill his wife. He drove a tow truck to a gas station, pretending he needed to fill it up. His absence from work was noted, and during that time, he returned home to wait for his wife to return. He was familiar with her daily routine, so he did not have to wait long. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff brutally killed his wife's dogs with a crowbar. The dogs, confused and frightened, began to fight. To stop the chaos, Jeff hit each dog on the head and then took his pet, Netarunu, into a room and locked the door. After the incident, he removed his wife's diamond earrings, intending to make it look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes, taking off his shirt and shoes, but he kept the jeans he wore during the massacre, likely overlooking the bloodstains on them. This oversight allowed forensic experts to find tiny drops of blood on the jeans, linking him to the crime. His lover called him while he was near his home, which revealed his location on the phone. When he arrived at the station, he attempted to dispose of the crowbar used in the attack, but did so carelessly, simply throwing it onto the roof of a utility building and not washing it. He believed the tool would never be discovered. Jeff was convicted of premeditated murder due to financial difficulties he thought he could overcome by collecting life insurance from his wife's death. Prosecutors presented substantial evidence linking him to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and the victim. His fingerprints were found on the crowbar, along with Cathy's blood on his clothing. He had attempted to stage a robbery and failed to completely conceal the earrings that were believed to have been stolen. Several people testified about domestic problems. Cathy still hoped to reconcile with her husband, despite being devastated by his betrayal. She truly loved him and was undaunted by his financial difficulties. What she craved most was love and understanding. Unfortunately, Jeff did not want to rekindle their relationship. Instead, he planned a murder that he believed would net him $29,000. It is suspected that Joy, one of Jeff's lovers, knew of his intentions. Jeff promised her a future together, on the condition that she pay off the debt he would incur from his crimes. During the hearing, the defense attempted to portray Jeff as a model husband and a good person, but no witness could reliably substantiate this claim. Jeff had never been a hard worker and showed little interest in his work. He had no motivation to do anything else and did not have a positive reputation in his family life. He was not a good husband, as he had a history of infidelity that his late wife knew about. His lifestyle was well known to friends and family. But it was his wife who suffered the most. When Jeff's efforts to build a better image failed, his attorney changed tactics. He began looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. However, the prosecution's strategy was well rehearsed and backed by substantial evidence, leaving little room for debate. The defense argued that Jeff was not the only possible suspect in Cathy's murder, claiming that the police had focused too quickly on him without fully exploring other potential suspects. In fact, police and the prosecutor's office had interviewed dozens of people and considered multiple suspects. Each suspect was thoroughly questioned, allowing police to eliminate those who did not fit the evidence. The prosecution argued that the attacker had two motives. First, he hoped to solve his financial problems through a life insurance policy. Second, he wanted to get rid of his troubled wife so he could live with one of his mistresses. Additionally, he sought to avoid the risk of losing his assets or having to divide his assets in a divorce. The prosecution also argued that Jeff's mistress, Lisa, knew about his plans. She supported him and was waiting for the call to hear about the progress of the crime. Her indiscretion led her to call Jeff, which provided the police with a vital clue. Investigations were conducted to determine whether the mistresses were involved in planning or organizing the crime, but the results were negative. However, it is clear that they supported the Jeff, even though they should have reported his bad intentions to the police to prevent the murder. Ultimately, no evidence was found to prove the lovers' guilt or involvement, so they faced no consequences in court. In September 2006, Jeff Lamb was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, Lisa wept uncontrollably in court. Cathy's family believes the court's ruling was fair. In Cathy's mother's opinion, Jeff should rot behind bars for the rest of his life. Hey detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington. As a child, his family moved to Cedar City, Utah. As a child, Michael enjoyed regular kid activities like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He was also an Eagle Scout and did well in school. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael spent a summer working at a fish plant in Alaska. He quickly rose to the position of line manager, supervising over a dozen people. His work ethic and dedication were recognized, leading to his promotion. A hardworking member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Michael went on a mission trip to southern Brazil. This experience strengthened his faith and commitment to his community. After returning to the United States, Michael attended Southern Utah University, graduating with a business degree in 2004. While at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle. They fell in love and were married at St. George's Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed to be the epitome of a hardworking husband and father. He coached his children's sports teams, attended school concerts, and spent time with them skiing and doing projects in the garage. However, on January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery exposed the dark reality of Michael's family life. That day, police found 8 bodies in Michael's home, leaving police and neighbors stunned and baffled. The alarm was raised when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael did not show up for work, prompting worried co-workers to call the police and request a welfare check at the family's home. Officers went to Michael's Enoch home, but no one answered when they knocked. Upon further inspection, the home appeared to be empty. Since Michael's family had 5 children, officers contacted the Iron County School District to check if any children were at school. They discovered that no children were there. When officers arrived at Michael's home, the Michaels lived in a 1-story home with a basement. Detectives arrived shortly after the home was designated a crime scene. Upon entering the master bedroom, they found 4-year-old Gavin lying face down, his head turned to the left. One of his arms was propped up under his head on a pillow, and a blanket partially covered his body. Tasha was similarly covered, with only part of her body under the blanket. On the other side of the bed, police found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother. Gail was lying on her back with her head on a pillow, and was also partially covered with a blanket, as were her daughter and grandson. When police searched Michael's home, they came across Bryn's room. Inside, they found the 12-year-old girl lying on the bed, slightly elevated and partially covered with a blanket. When they entered Amon's room, police found a 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner. Notably, unlike his siblings, he had no pillow or blanket. Sienna, Amon's twin sister, was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side on the bed with her head on a pillow, covered with a blanket. Michael's oldest child, Macy, 17, was also found on the bed, her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. Police later located Michael in the basement gym, where he was lying on a sleeping bag. Each of the 8 victims suffered fatal gunshot wounds. It didn't take long for police to identify Michael Haight as the prime suspect. They believe he killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. As the investigation began, a neighbor shared important information that helped police create a timeline of events. The neighbor reported that she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, she knew that the day fireworks were allowed in the neighborhood had passed, which made her feel uneasy. The neighbor went on to say that after the first bang, she heard 2 more bangs in quick succession. This noise was followed by a short pause, then several more bangs. Police suspect that the loud noises the neighbor heard around 3:30 a.m. were related to the brutal murder that occurred that night, which they believe was committed by Michael. During the investigation, police learned that a non-family member had reported the abuse to the Department of Child Services in 2020. The person spoke with Macy, then 14, and she shared her fears about her father, leading to a further investigation into the Michael family. After receiving the report, child welfare and child protection agencies interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she shared alarming details. She mentioned instances where her father choked her, leaving her in fear for her life. Macy revealed that these violent incidents began in 2017. One incident involved her father grabbing her by the shoulders and pushing her against a piece of wooden furniture. When police spoke with Macy's father, Michael, he denied harming his daughter. He downplayed the seriousness of the incidents Macy described, calling them a misunderstanding. Michael attributed his emotional state to the death of his father and his brother's recent divorce. Michael admitted to taking his frustrations out on his eldest daughter. However, his wife, Tasha, chose not to file a criminal complaint against him. After an investigation, Child Protective Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County District Attorney's Office also decided not to prosecute because the case did not meet the criteria for prosecution. Additionally, a fatality assessment was conducted with Tasha, and according to her response, it did not indicate that her relationship with Michael was fatal. However, victim support services were provided to Tasha and the children in the months after the case was opened. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, the police developed a different view of Michael than the one he presented to the public. When visiting Tasha, her friends would often leave the kitchen faucet on to hide their conversations because Tasha suspected Michael was eavesdropping. To avoid giving Michael a reason to yell at Tasha, her friends would also help her with housework. Whenever they texted Tasha, she would reply with short, positive messages, possibly knowing that Michael might be reading them. This behavior suggested that Tasha was trying to maintain a positive appearance in front of Michael, implying that their marriage was not in trouble. Police investigating the case discovered that Michael displayed a high level of control over his wife, Tasha. He exercised this control in a variety of ways, including confiscating her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Additionally, Michael's reaction when Tasha purchased a $30 rug from Walmart to replace her dirty carpet raised further suspicions about his behavior. Tasha needed to buy a rug, but her husband, Michael, was angry and said it was a waste of money. Tasha talked to her friends about how her 7-year-old son, Amon, had begun to act like his father, imitating his father's bad behavior. When Tasha asked Amon to do something, he would say, "That's not my job," which worried Tasha because it showed that Amon was not taking responsibility and was not listening to her. This is similar to how Michael often ignores or dismisses Tasha's requests, and it seems that Amon is adopting similar habits. In 2022, Tasha made the rare decision to get a manicure as an act of self-care. However, her husband, Michael, objected and tried to limit her freedom. Despite this, Tasha still felt younger and more confident after getting her nails done. She decided to make this a monthly habit, but Michael strongly objected because of cost concerns. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 a month, but Michael was still unconvinced. He argued that spending money on her nails would take away from the needs of her children, demonstrating a controlling attitude and a strong sense of financial responsibility. At the same time, Tasha began taking better care of herself and losing weight. This came after years of her husband, Michael, calling her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael becomes angry when she loses weight. He accuses her of being unfaithful, trying to explain away her change in appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalates as he tries to order Tasha to stop losing weight. He begs her to stop because he fears that other men will find her attractive. This demand stems from his own deep insecurities and his need to control his wife's body and actions. Tasha's friends report an incident involving the family's kitchen table to the police. The table is broken and Tasha needs to replace it. However, her husband, Michael, refuses to provide the necessary funds. Frustrated by the situation, Tasha decides to take matters into her own hands. She decides to refurbish the old table, hoping to improve its appearance and functionality. Michael is unhappy with this decision because Tasha did not ask for his permission. This is not the first time this has happened. During the holiday season, Michael was very frugal with the family finances. Despite earning a substantial income from his job at All 8, he only gave $100 to each child for Christmas gifts. Tasha always wanted to give her children a full Christmas, but Michael's reluctance to add money made this difficult. He believed his income was legitimate and did not feel the need to provide more for the family. Michael's intense focus on reducing waste and conserving resources leads him to impose strict household rules on Tasha. She is required to wash and reuse plastic bags, no matter how many times they have been used. This adds to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. Additionally, Michael's need for control also affects Tasha's hygiene and childcare habits. Michael requires Tasha to use wipes and, claiming that it is better for the environment and will save money. However, this makes Tasha feel uncomfortable and stressed. If she does not follow Michael's instructions, he will punish her severely. He makes it clear that disobedience will lead to a lot of trouble for her. This threat creates a sense of fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her with no choice but to comply with Michael's demands. According to Tasha's friends, she shared with them that Michael's abuse was initially directed at her during their marriage. However, in the late 2010s, Michael began abusing their children as well. Macy suffered greatly as the abuse escalated. Michael put a lot of pressure on Macy to get straight A's. The burden of these unrealistic expectations became too much for Macy to bear. Macy's friends reported another disturbing incident to the police. One evening, Michael came home to find Macy sitting with her head in her mother's lap. He became angry and told Macy to get up and clean her room. This left Macy deeply disturbed, as she recalled looking into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil. Police also discovered an incident involving 7-year-old Briley, who was playing with a changing table and would not stop when Michael told her to stop. This led Michael to blame his wife, Tasha, for their children's behavior, calling them the worst kids in the world, disrespectful and horrible. Furthermore, Michael would insult Tasha, calling her fat and ugly, all in front of their 5 children. Tasha decided to end her 20-year marriage to Michael after his abusive behavior and uncontrollable rages. This event made her realize the harm it was causing their children, and she knew she had to leave the marriage. Although the divorce was difficult for Tasha after 2 decades together, she prioritized the safety and well-being of her children over her commitment to the marriage. On December 21, 2022, Tasha filed for divorce from her husband, Michael. However, she requested that the divorce papers be delivered after the holidays, wanting one last normal Christmas for her 5 children before separating. Tasha anticipated that Michael's behavior would worsen once the papers were delivered, and she sought to shield their children from potential repercussions during the holidays. The divorce papers were delivered to Michael at his office on December 27th. Michael contacted Tasha and conversed as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. During the call, he asked Tasha to leave their home but demanded that she leave their children behind. Tasha was adamant that she would not leave without the children. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah, despite Michael's objections. That evening, Michael went to his mother-in-law's house and asked Tasha to go out with him, but she refused. Tasha told friends that she felt uneasy being alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mother, Gail Earle, moved in to support Tasha and the children. However, Michael's behavior made the situation worse. Instead of leaving the house, Michael moved into the basement, which also served as a gym. He slept on a sleeping bag on the floor, used a pillow, and hung his clothes on a hanger on a couch outside the door. Tasha shared her concerns with her friends about a major problem she had discovered. She discovered that $220,000 had disappeared from the children's savings accounts. After further investigation, she discovered that Michael was responsible for secretly transferring money without telling her. Additionally, Tasha inherited several weapons from her late father, including shotguns and handguns. However, in early January 2023, she noticed that all of these weapons were missing from her home. A subsequent investigation revealed that Michael had taken these weapons, leaving Tasha and her family unprotected and vulnerable in the event of an emergency. Macy, the eldest daughter of Michael and Tasha, has told several friends that she supports her parents' divorce. She feels that the presence of her father, Michael, in the home has caused tension and she wishes for peace in the separation. Macy has even taken steps to document her father's behavior, secretly recording him with a hidden phone when he acts erratically. She has confided to a friend that she is gathering evidence to support her parents' divorce. However, her mother, Tasha, found the phone and took it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, faced a difficult home life due to constant trouble. To escape, Briley often went to a neighbor's house, where she found comfort in playing with the neighbor's grandchildren, who were children about her age. She told a friend that she was really relieved when her parents got divorced and was even looking forward to buying some new books, but she didn't dare tell her father because she was afraid he would be angry. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney to discuss her divorce from her abusive husband Michael. At the time, Michael was still living in the family home, but had recently moved into the basement, which provided Tasha with some relief. Her attorneys asked her if she ever felt concerned for her safety or that of her children because of Michael's erratic behavior. Despite Michael's occasional outbursts, Tasha told her attorneys that she never felt her safety or that of her children was threatened. In retrospect, it is clear that Tasha's optimism and misplaced trust in her husband were tragically misplaced. The investigation into the shooting of Michael Haight's family was a difficult and disturbing process for police as they reconstructed the events that led to the tragedy. A chilling discovery emerged from digital evidence collected from the family's computers and cell phones. On December 30th, just days before the shooting, Michael made a disturbing Google search at 10:41 p.m. He searched for information about guns and shootings, which, combined with other evidence, suggested a dark intent. Search queries included questions about how loud a 9mm gun is, how to recognize a gunshot, and what to do if you hear a gunshot in your neighborhood. In a letter, Michael wrote before he took his own life, he said he would rather rot in hell than endure what he described as his wife's controlling behavior. Michael expressed that he could not endure the situation for another day and was determined to end the manipulation and control he had endured. Michael's letter expressed deep frustration and despair. He had repeatedly asked for help, but no one seemed to listen. In this letter, Michael emphasized his determination not to become a burden to society. The details of the letter he left behind shocked and disbelieving many. Michael's actions were calculated and premeditated. He had planned the murder carefully, ensuring that his wife and children would not find out until it was too late. Detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angie Houseman. Angie Houseman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father left the family before she was born, and she would never have the chance to meet him. However, her mother married a man named Ronald when she was 1 year old, and in the addition of a younger brother to the family. The two sisters got along very well, with Angie particularly fond of her younger brother. Angie was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, always striving to build relationships with those around her. Her family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, about a mile away from her home. Her daily go-to-school involved taking a bus from a nearby stop, which her parents considered relatively safe due to its proximity to their house. Typically, Angie and her neighborhood friends walked together from the school to the bus stop after class. There were many parents watching from their windows to ensure their safety. This has become a habit in their neighborhood, intended to provide peace of mind that children will return home safely. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine, attending school and finishing at 3 p.m. She took the school bus home with a few neighborhood kids. At that point, the other kids continued to their homes. Angie walked alone the short remaining distance home, because her house was farther away. However, Angie didn't arrive home, and as the minutes passed, her parents started to worry. They knew Angie often chatted with friends on her way home, but it has never taken this long. Concerned, Angie's mom and stepdad decided to walk along her route from the house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. While walking, they met other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed she had gotten off the bus with them and headed in the direction of her home. The parents also spoke with neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids, but were preoccupied on that particular day and hadn't seen anything. Angie's parents became more and more worried and insecure. They and their friends started searching the area along her route from the bus stop to their home. As the sun began to set and darkness fell, they didn't give up. Realizing Angie was unlikely to wander off in the cold weather, the parents eventually decided to call the police. The police immediately joined the search for Angie. Due to the cold weather, it seemed unlikely that she would wander off alone. Therefore, the police initially focused on investigating whether she had been kidnapped. 10 days before Angie went missing, an 11-year-old girl was almost kidnapped in a nearby area, which made everyone even more concerned. An unknown person approached the girl as she got off the school bus and attempted to pull her into the bushes. Fortunately, she managed to escape. However, since the assailant was still at large, the police believed he might be linked to Angie's disappearance. To investigate, officers deployed K9 units, which detected Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs tracked the scent about halfway to her house, but lost it suddenly, suggesting that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that location, which further supported the possibility of an abduction. The police expanded their search for Angie by deploying helicopters with thermal sensors and scouring the banks of a nearby stream, but they failed to locate either the girl or her belongings. The first day, the search turned up no results. As the investigation unfolded, the police released information about Angie's disappearance to the media, which quickly spread throughout the city. The police department receiving over 300 calls within 24 hours. To manage the influx of leads, more than 20 additional officers were assigned to the case. However, none of these clues were helpful in finding Angie. The detectives pursued every lead, with a strong focus on Angie's stepfather from the beginning. Despite this, he insisted he was innocent and willingly cooperated with the investigation, even agreeing to take a lie detector test in an effort to clear his name and help the police focus on finding Angie. During the investigation into Angie's biological father, a new piece of information came to light. Although he had never been in direct contact with his daughter, but the biological father had allegedly driven past her house multiple times to watch her play outside, according to Angie's mother. While detectives found this behavior suspicious, the biological father had a solid alibi that checked out. By the third day, the FBI joined the investigation, and the police department allocated even more officers to the case. It was clear to everyone that something serious had happened to Angie, as she could barely survive on the streets in such harsh weather conditions. A break in the case came when a witness in Angie's neighborhood reported seeing a suspicious man driving a blue sedan. The description matched a person who had attempted to abduct a girl just 10 days earlier. Based on this, investigators created a composite sketch, which was featured in the media and appearing on thousands of distributed flyers. Unfortunately, the identity of the suspect remained a mystery. As Angie's disappearance gained national attention through television, the number of leads increased. Police carefully evaluated each one but found no connections to the case. However, as the case drew more public attention, psychics started contacting Angie's family, claiming to have had visions of the missing girl. One psychic even named a specific location, a large national park 25 miles from Angie's home, where they believed she was being held. However, detectives chose not to pursue this information. To encourage tips, a $10,000 reward was offered for any information about Angie's location, resulting in an influx of tips. During the investigation, detectives discovered a disturbing detail. A few days before she disappeared, Angie mentioned to her teacher that she would be going on a nature trip with her uncle. However, this statement raised red flags, as Angie did not actually have an uncle, and her parents were unaware of what she meant by this claim. Detectives considered the possibility that Angie might have known the person who took her, referring to them as her uncle in conversation. Despite their efforts, investigators failed to uncover any information about this mysterious individual in the days that followed. The case seemed to be at a standstill until 9 days after Angie's disappearance, on November 27th. A young girl's body was discovered near a tree, severely mistreated. She had no clothing on and was bound with handcuffs. Her head was completely covered in tape, except for a small exposed area around her nose. A nearby bag contained personal items, including notebooks with her name, that confirmed the body was that of Angie. Autopsies by medical examiners revealed more disturbing details about Angie's death. A piece of underwear was found stuffed in her mouth after the tape on her head was removed. The investigation determined that she had died just hours before her discovery and had likely been held captive for 9 days before succumbing. Furthermore, experts concluded that Angie suffered numerous physical injuries and endured a sexual assault. A thorough examination of the crime scene by forensic experts led to the discovery of a fingerprint on the tape used to cover Angie's head. The police tried to find matching information in the database and between several suspects, but didn't bring any clues. Following the discovery of the body, the police increased their efforts in the investigation. As news of the tragic incident spread, local residents became fearful, increasing their vigilance. To protect their children, they started escorting them to and from school, meeting them at bus stops, and keeping a close watch over them at all times. On December 1st, a 10-year-old girl named Cathy Lamb went missing in a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's house. Cathy had received permission from her mother to visit friends who lived a short distance away. But she never made it to their home. The police were unsuccessful in locating her, fueling the detectives' fear that they might be dealing with a serial killer. Initially, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Cathy's disappearances. However, they lacked evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Cathy's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bedding in a curtain. The cause of death was determined to be severe head trauma from multiple blows. Despite the investigation, detectives were unable to uncover any leads pointing to the killer. Furthermore, the distinct nature of the two crimes led them to reconsider their initial theory. As a result, they began to consider the possibility of two separate murderers in the same month. Investigations into Angie's disappearance led detectives to identify a man who had attempted to abduct another girl a few days earlier. The suspect, 37-year-old Gary, frequently traveled to St. Louis for work. Although he became a person of interest in the murders of Angie and Casey, he had a solid alibi for the time they went missing. However, during questioning, Gary admitted to assaulting 4 other girls and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. The following February, the case took a new turn. Near where Casey's body was found, investigators found tire tracks that were associated with a pickup truck from a well-known rental car company known for its distinctive logo. Detectives showed photos of the tire tracks to locals, asking if they had seen a pickup truck from that company in the area. The detectives received a crucial lead. One woman came forward, saying she had seen such a pickup near her neighbor's house about a week after Casey's disappearance. After investigation, the police discovered that the house belonged to a woman living with her husband and brother. She claimed none of them had rented the pickup and maintained they were not connected to the case. However, detectives remained skeptical and obtained a search warrant for the house. The search revealed blood matching Casey's in the basement, along with the murder weapon. A further investigation uncovered key information in Casey's case. The pickup truck used to transport the body was rented by Thomas, the brother of the woman who owned the house. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with the existing evidence, he eventually confessed. According to Thomas's statement, Casey knocked on his door and wanted to invite his nephews to come out with her. Thomas invited Casey into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Casey screamed, Thomas hit her with a heavy object, ultimately killing her. He then covered her body with bed sheets. Despite committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, Thomas' sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement, but she didn't want to know what had happened and asked that it be disposed of quickly. Casey's body remained in the basement for a week because outside, the search was still going on for her. Thomas was too afraid to move Casey's body until the investigation died down. Once the situation became less intense, Thomas rented a pickup truck, transported Casey's body to St. Louis, and abandoned it there. Thomas was eventually convicted of Casey's murder and received a death sentence. However, he died in prison several years later due to illnesses before the sentence could be carried out. During the investigation, Thomas denied any connection to Angie's case, leading detectives to believe that the two cases were not connected. The investigation into Angie's murder stagnated for many months, with the number of leads dwindling over time. Years later, detectives encountered a new obstacle, the expiration of the reward for providing information, which detectives feared would decrease public involvement. However, a local businessman donated $250,000 to incentivize people to come forward with information. This bonus was one of the biggest at the time, generated a large number of tips, but disappointingly, the case remains unsolved. In 2001, a prison inmate named Corey Fox contacted detectives and confessed to over 10 murders, including the murder of Angie Houseman. Detectives met with Corey, then he recounted how he and an accomplice abducted Angie from the street and held her captive in his house for several days. Initially, the plan was to demand a ransom in exchange for Angie's safe return. However, Corey and his accomplice became concerned that they might be identified and decided to murder her. Corey provided detectives with many accurate details about the crime, including the fact that Angie was tied to a tree and that his accomplice used her underwear as a gag. However, some discrepancies arose during the questioning, particularly with regards to how Angie was restrained. Corey claimed that they used plastic handcuffs, but evidence showed that perpetrator actually used iron handcuffs. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey could not have committed some of the murders he confessed to. As a result, police concluded that he likely fabricated parts of his confession, possibly drawing information from media of Angie's case. In the summer of 2002, when a 6-year-old girl was abducted from her home and murdered in a different St. Louis neighborhood. Authorities initially considered whether the two crimes were connected, but this theory proved unfounded. The killer, a neighbor, was quickly caught and confessed during questioning. The investigation into Angie's case lay dormant for several years, until 2007, when detectives reopened the file. Upon reviewing the case documents, they stumbled upon a noteworthy detail. Shortly after Angie's body was discovered, police had found a man named Roger Martin sitting in a parked car nearby. When questioned about his emergence, Roger claimed he was in the area to go hunting. However, a search of his vehicle revealed no hunting equipment, raising suspicions about his true intentions. The new detective team decided to investigate Roger further, which revealed his prior convictions for crimes against children. Notably, one of his past victims was assaulted near the area where Angie's body was discovered. All of these crimes happened before Angie's death, but the police had failed to thoroughly look into Roger at the time. This meant that the new team had to start over from the beginning. The detectives brought Roger in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Angie's murder. He claimed that he just happened to be near that location. The interrogation lasted 9 hours, but still yielded no new clues. The police compared Roger's fingerprints with the ones on the tape found on Angie's head, but the experts found that they did not match. As a result, Roger was released. Although the police continued to consider him a suspect, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. The case of Angie saw a breakthrough in 2018, when the St. Louis Police Department created a task force specifically to investigate this case. With the advancement of technology, the detectives re-examined the existing evidence, searching for new leads. Their investigation centered on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and her underwear used as a gag. Despite repeated efforts since 1993, experts had struggled to detect the perpetrator's DNA on these items. The task force decided to re-examine the evidence with modern technology. The detectives first focused on the handcuffs but encountered a difficulty due to the presence of Angie's blood covering almost the entire surface. Next, they turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head, but faced another obstacle. Upon opening the box containing the evidence, they discovered that the tape had deteriorated significantly over time. Finally, they examined the underwear that had been used to gag Angie. Although they did not have much hope for this evidence, since it had been in her mouth for hours, so it was likely that any foreign DNA had been removed. However, they still investigated it as a last resort. Using advanced technology, they carefully examined every inch of the underwear, leading to a breakthrough. A small sample of DNA was found, sufficient for analysis. The experts confirmed the DNA belonged to a male and immediately uploaded it to the FBI database. Although it is common for DNA searches to yield no matches, requiring additional investigation, the detectives were fortunate in this case. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a full match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been incarcerated since 2003. In the investigation into Angie's case, Earl Cox initially had not been on the police's radar, but his criminal record was substantial. His history of crime dated back to 1982, when he was serving in the military in Germany and working as a part-time babysitter for girls reported being sexually assaulted by Earl, resulting in an 8-year prison sentence in the United States. He was subsequently discharged from the Army after serving only 3 years. Earl was released from prison early and moved to St. Louis. However, 4 years later, he found himself in trouble with the law again. In this instance, he was arrested after 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexually assaulting them. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, the arrest itself was a parole violation. As a result, Earl received an additional year in prison. After serving this extra year, Earl was released in 1992 and settled in St. Louis, where his relatives lived. The following year, a tragic incident happened. Earl abducted and killed Angie. In 2002, Earl was arrested again for operating a secret online platform where individuals shared child abuse content. The FBI had been monitoring his activities and set a trap by having an undercover agent pose as a 14-year-old girl and make contact with him. Earl made explicit intentions to exploit the girl and sent money for her to meet him. However, when Earl showed up at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents instead of the girl. This led to his arrest. A search of his computer revealed a massive collection of over 45,000 images of child abuse. Further investigation also revealed that Earl was the mastermind behind the platform, leading to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site. This operation was one of the largest against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Earl was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his sentence ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep Earl in detention, citing him as a serious threat to children. As a result, Earl remained in prison. In 2019, a DNA match linked Earl to Angie Hausman's case. Detectives visited him in prison, but Earl denied involvement and requested a lawyer. Despite the strong DNA evidence, investigators took an alternative approach. They offered Earl's lawyer a deal. In exchange for Earl's confession, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and pursue a life sentence instead. Earl agreed, likely aware that he would lose the case in court. When detectives returned to the prison, Earl shared his account of incident. Although some details raised suspicions, his admission to the murder was the key point for investigators. Earl claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving through his family's neighborhood when his car broke down. And while he was trying to find out what was wrong with the car, a school bus pulled up and children disembarked. While the others went home, Angie remained outside, drawing Earl's attention. Earl claimed that when Angie approached him, they had a brief chat, and he noticed she seemed extremely cold. He offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Earl then took Angie to Burger King to get food, and afterwards, took her to his home. Here, he sexually assaulted her for several days. Eventually, Earl decided to dispose of Angie, drove her to a remote location, where her body was later found, and tied her to a tree. However, she was still alive at that time. Detectives had doubts about certain parts of Earl's story. They didn't think Angie would agree to go anywhere with a stranger, especially since she only had a short distance to walk home. Investigators have questioned Earl's story about the car breakdown, as he claimed the car stalled but started again as soon as Angie approached. It seems more likely that Earl saw Angie and decided to abduct her. A more probable scenario is that he lured her into the car by lying or threatening her. This is more credible than his confession. Detectives were to obtain the confession they needed for the murder. Earl Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole by a judge in August 2020. Although justice had been served, it came too late for Angie's mother, who had passed away from cancer in 2016. Her husband, Ronald, felt that Cox's actions had indirectly contributed to her death. As her grief over losing Angie had weakened her health and will to live, ultimately leading to her passing. For Earl, his sentence was more than just the initial verdict. Authorities re-examined a previous case of sexual abuse involving two 7-year-old girls, for which Earl had initially received a lenient sentence. At that time, he had only spent 1 year in prison for violating his parole. However, years later, investigators contacted one of his victims, now an adult, and asked for her testimony against him. Faced with the of a life sentence, Earl chose to plead guilty and as a result, received an additional 10-year prison sentence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Catherine Pileggi. Ronald Vinci was born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. From a young age, he showed a natural talent for entrepreneurship. In his 20s, he started his first business by renting a space on the Pacific Coast to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of the largest Honda dealership centers in the state. As his business success continued to grow, so did his wealth. Ronald expanded his business by opening more car dealerships, which significantly increased his earnings. Those who worked for him often described him as a strong-willed and determined individual. In his personal life, Ronald Vinci was married to a woman named Pamela, with whom he had a son named Carey. However, their marriage eventually ended in divorce. After his divorce, Ronald began living a more extravagant lifestyle, spending his wealth on luxury items such as expensive toys, airplanes, and helicopters. His passion for collecting aircraft led him to acquire a large hangar to house his extensive collection. Ronald simplified his daily commute to work by securing government approval to build a helicopter pad on his property, despite some of his neighbors opposing the idea. Having the helicopter pad allowed him to commute to work directly from home by helicopter. He also had helicopter pads installed on the roofs of his car dealerships, making it easier for him to travel by air. Ronald, then 50 years old, met 34 years old Catherine in 1990. At the time, Catherine worked as a flight attendant. She originally from a family in a rural area of Georgia. Growing up, she participated in local beauty pageants where her bright smile and charisma easily captivated people. Her striking beauty and cheerful personality earned her many admirers. After completing her education, Catherine worked as a lab technician at a veterans hospital for several years. However, she felt unfulfilled and longed for more in life. Seeking a change, Catherine left her job in 1980 to join Delta Airlines as a flight attendant, earning an annual income of $20,000. She enjoyed her new role, taking care of passengers and serving meals, and even acquired useful tips like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors on airplane seats. 10 years into her career as a flight attendant, Catherine's life took a dramatic turn. In 1990, she met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, on a flight. Despite their 14-year age difference, they fell in love, drawn to each other's charming personalities. Catherine eventually left her job and moved into Ronald's luxurious California home. Together, they shared a passion for travel and explored various destinations, with Aspen, Colorado, being a favorite getaway spot. Ronald and Catherine were in a decade-long relationship, but Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they decided to part ways. Catherine moved to Florida, seeking a fresh start and a new partner. In April 2001, at age 45, Catherine began a relationship with 63 years old Dilio Carano, a financially stable insurance agent, after being introduced by mutual friends. She shared with Dilio her previous unhappy relationship with Ronald, explained that it was a difficult time, filled with arguments, excessive drinking, and infidelity. Ronald had never proposed, despite her decade-long hope for marriage. Dilio promptly proposed to Catherine, and they got married in May 2001, just a month after meeting. After their wedding, the couple settled in Miami Beach, Florida, and Catherine seemed content with the marriage. Dilio describes Catherine's initial demeanor as being like a house cat, gentle, calm, and eating very little. In addition, Catherine is very afraid of water. She cannot bathe in the ocean, sea, or river. A few months into their marriage, Dilio noticed a dramatic change in Catherine's behavior. She began asking him for large sums of money, insisting that he buy her clothes and gifts. She would often compare him to her friends' more generous husbands. According to Dilio, Catherine was taking about $55,000 per month from him. She claimed the money was for education expenses, but never provided any receipts. After a few months of this financial strain, Delio realized he had made a mistake by rushing into the marriage. He decided he wanted a divorce. The separation process was relatively easy, as they had no children or shared assets. Court documents revealed that Delio's net worth was $4.5 million, while Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Delio's house, she was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. In 2005, Ronald Vinci, a wealthy millionaire, made a big change by moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where friends had convinced him he would enjoy a favorable climate and low taxes. Prior to the move, Ronald had sold his car dealerships and amassed a substantial fortune. He purchased a luxurious fourth-floor apartment in Fort Lauderdale and soon reconnected with Catherine, a flight attendant he had previously dated. Catherine moved in with Ronald, and they rekindled their romance. Coincidentally, Catherine's ex-husband, Delio Carano, lived in the same building but 30 floors. Delio was perplexed by Catherine's decision to reconnect with Ronald, whom she had previously described as a monster. Neither Ronald nor Catherine go to work. They enjoyed a life of leisure, but their differences became increasingly apparent. Ronald struggled with his weight due to his love of rich foods, while Catherine maintained a strict diet and a very low weight of 42 kilograms. Ronald and Catherine had distinct personalities. Ronald loved attending lively parties, whereas Catherine preferred quieter evenings at home, often lost in crime novels. She favored casual clothing like shorts and sneakers. Despite their contrasting tastes, they commonly traveled together, exploring the Caribbean islands by air and sailing across the ocean. However, she struggled with aquaphobia, and her diary entries revealed her intense fear of the ocean. Ronald consistently encouraged Catherine to overcome her fear, and she made an effort to join him on these adventures despite her anxieties. This suggests Ronald had a strong influence over her. When not traveling, Ronald and Catherine would often host gatherings at their home. During these events, Ronald enjoyed great food and drinks, frequently ordering $1 tacos and strong beverages when out with friends at budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront. On occasion, he would embarrass Catherine by implying she was entirely dependent on him. Despite this, Catherine remained calm and composed. However, Catherine maintained her composure. She would quietly cater to Ronald's needs, especially when he had been drinking, by serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends. Ronald's relationship with Catherine persisted for 5 years, despite his increasing hesitation to propose marriage. By 2010, he began sharing his feelings with friends, revealing his desire to end the relationship and find a younger partner. In early 2011, Ronald was hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues, which his doctors attributed to his years of excessive alcohol consumption. Prior to the hospitalization, Ronald had noticed an unusual change in the taste of his food, which sparked concern for his health. A friend joked that Catherine might have tried to poison him, but Ronald dismissed the idea without considering it seriously. Ronald's health issues mainly stemmed from his poor self-care. His frequent consumption of alcohol and pills, which he used to unwind and sleep, had severe negative effects on his body. Ronald Vinci purchased a $3 million waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale in June 2011, where he planned to spend his retirement. The 70-year-old millionaire looked forward to visits from his son, Kerry, and his grandson. Kerry worked as a waiter, a job that Ronald often teased his about, Ronald jokingly suggesting he was holding out for his inheritance. Tragedy struck on the afternoon of June 28, 2011. When Ronald's gardener called 911, reporting an incident at the mansion. Upon arrival, police found Ronald's lifeless body in a guest bedroom, wrapped in plastic bags and tightly sealed with tape inside a sleeping bag. Additionally, the sleeping bag contained soiled sheets and was covered with what appeared to be wet dirt, later confirmed to be coffee grounds. A further investigation revealed a slashed mattress. The gardener told the police that Catherine had said Ronald fell down the stairs, hit his head, and died. However, the officers were not convinced it was an accident. During questioning, the gardener provided a disturbing account of the incident before finding Ronald Vinci's body. When the gardener arrived at the Ronald residence in the morning, after receiving an urgent call from Catherine late at night, he was met with an horrific scene. Ronald's lifeless body was wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in a guest bedroom. Catherine, visibly upset, begged the gardener to help her bury Ronald, revealing that Ronald wanted to be laid to rest in the ocean after his death. To fulfill this wish, Catherine had bought a blue container for Ronald's body, intending to take it out to sea on Ronald's yacht. Catherine had already stored the container in her garage before authorities were notified by the gardener. The medical examiner's thorough examination revealed horrific findings. 70-year-old Ronald had suffered from 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, had injuries consistent with being hit by a hammer, and was ultimately killed by a gunshot wound to the head. Earlier, on the evening of June 27th, friends gathered at Ronald's house. Catherine prepared a meal for the guests, while Ronald served drinks. The evening seemed normal at first, but it quickly turned into a tragic one. On the evening in question, Ronald reported that his passport and one of his pistols were missing during dinner. He also complained about the food, saying it was unusually bitter. Feeling unwell, Ronald unexpectedly went to bed at 7:30 p.m., a departure from his usual late-night routine. His friends found this early bedtime suspicious and eventually left his house. Later that night, Catherine was brought in for questioning. In her confession, she described a confrontation with Ronald, which occurred around 1 a.m. on June 28. According to she, a drunk Ronald woke up and began verbally insulting her. The situation escalated, resulting in Ronald chasing her down the stairs. However, he lost his balance, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed that she helped Ronald up and led him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. After cleaning the blood stains on the stairs, she checked on him a few hours later and found him asleep with a loaded gun. Catherine stated that she feared for her life, believing Ronald might kill her. In a state of fear and desperation, she grabbed the gun and shot Ronald in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine explained her actions, saying she was consumed by fear and anger, feeling as though her soul had left her body. After the shooting, Catherine further injured Ronald by stabbing him with a knife and hitting him with a hammer. She then wrapped his body in a bag in an attempt to hide the evidence. Realizing she needed help, Catherine contacted someone known as the gardener for assistance with disposing of the body. Before hiding the body, Catherine purchased a large container from a hardware store, intending to use it to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. This was confirmed by surveillance camera photos. Subsequent investigations uncovered a gun in Catherine's car, with her fingerprints on it, matching the gun used to shoot Ronald. Her car also contained a knife, pieces of a cut-up mattress, clothing, rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Just a month before the crime, she had been involved in a dispute with her sister. Catherine's sister claimed that she had borrowed money and refused to pay it back. But she maintained that the money was a gift and therefore did not owe her sister anything. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams coming from his house on the night of the murder. Additionally, a witness spotted a white vehicle with a large trailer near Ronald's house early in the morning. The car belonged to the gardener. According to Ronald's friends, he had been trying to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had been experiencing marital problems, including a lack of intimacy, and had been sleeping in separate rooms for months. In an attempt to finalize the separation, Ronald had tried to give she $1 million, just weeks before the tragedy, asking her to leave their house permanently. Prosecutors suspect Catherine's main motive was fear of losing her wealthy partner, Ronald. In contrast, Catherine's defense team argued that she was a victim of severe abuse and had acted in self-defense. Several questions arose during the trial, including why Catherine didn't immediately contact the police, why she initially lied about the incident, and why she endured years of abuse without leaving Ronald. Catherine's relatives testified in her defense, and a court psychiatrist identified signs of domestic abuse. However, none of Ronald's close friends or associates witnessed or reported any mistreatment in their relationship. Instead, they described she as calm and content, never complaining about her life. During the trial, Catherine made a surprising accusation against Ronald, claiming that he was responsible for the sudden and mysterious death of her younger sister, Angela, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela went on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela struggled with substance abuse and, during a party on the ship, she drank excessively, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an attempt to save her sister, Catherine performed CPR, but unfortunately, Angela's heart stopped and she passed away. It was later discovered that Ronald had given Angela some pills on the evening of the cruise, which allegedly were intended to help her relax. Catherine strongly believed that these pills played a role in her sister's death. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Catherine was found guilty of Ronald's murder in 2014. The jury delivered a verdict that resulted in Catherine being sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida, and is set to be released in January 2034 at the age of 77.